As I mentioned, I'm very grateful to be here. I'm honored. It's a platform that I feel strongly about in this age of technology. I'm grateful that there are, of course, many ways that we're, as a people, using technology in forms that don't lead towards ending suffering. And I'm grateful that this is one of the forms that really assists and ending suffering. And it's very touching to me to watch people logging in from all over. So welcome. Thank you for being part of this community, this global community. I find the interactive parts of these calls to be the most juicy for me. That's where I really feel like some of the magic gets to happen. And I'm excited to share a specific topic with you today that I hope will stimulate some inquiry. We shall see. I'd love to begin with a sit. So we'll sit for half an hour, as I understand is the traditional amount of sitting time for this call. And I invite you to get comfortable. And for this next meditation, I invite you to sit in whatever way is most comfortable and supportive for you in this moment, whatever way allows the spine to be open and free, while also finding the place in which you're not exerting a lot of effort or struggling in any way. And then my greatest encouragement, I know that some people on this call have not attended a call like this before. There are also many regulars, but for the folks that are new, my greatest encouragement is to set everything else aside for the next period of time here, hour and a half. Give yourself the opportunity to have an hour and a half retreat in your day. Before we sit, I wanted to read the theme of today again, just to have that floating around in awareness during your experience of being still. So the topic is surrendering to awareness. And what we wrote before, what often in spiritual practice, there's an encouragement to observe. And from that place of observation, we attempt to be with what arises. So I'm going to be with my sadness. I'm going to be with my anger. And I'm curious about and looking forward to sharing with you about this process of when that being with gets colonized by the ego. So, who is it that's doing the being with? What is it that's doing the being with? And specifically, what shifts in our practice when we surrender to awareness and when we recognize ourselves as awareness? So that'll be the theme of our exploration today. With that, I invite you, please, to allow the eyes to close or remain soft and open, gazing down at a 45-degree angle. I'll be talking through much of the sitting meditation here and there. But there will, of course, be much silence. So again, if you're new to this form, we haven't gone anywhere. The quiet times are just our opportunity to be seeping in the stillness and the silence of the moment. So as you settle into your experience of the moment, allow rest. For this specific meditation, I invite a softening of the attention, a resting back of the attention into the open, spacious field of awareness. So often our attention is moving outward from thing to thing to thing, from object to thought. To pursuing desire, to those forms. In this meditation, I invite you to recognize awareness as the source of attention. And I invite you to allow the attention to rest in awareness. Notice that it takes no effort to rest in awareness. simply being the presence of awareness. Are you aware of being aware? This is not a question for the conditioned mind. And it's not a deeply esoteric question. Just notice, are you aware of being aware? Where do you look to answer that question? How do you answer the question, am I aware? Where do you turn? Are you making effort to be aware right now? Does it require effort to be aware? Does it require effort for the attention to sink back into its source, into this awareness, this open space, this infinite space in which all experience arises? Does that take effort? Notice now in your meditation, as you rest, And as you know yourself as this awareness. We understandably so get identified with thoughts and feelings, our perceptions, and we overlook the knowing of ourselves as awareness. Meditation is not an activity of the mind. It's not something to be done. Meditation is to simply be knowingly who you are, to rest there. It's the easiest thing in the world. This meditation does not require the mind to be in a particular condition. Simply allow your thoughts to be as they are. Awareness is always allowing everything to be as it is. And that's not being accomplished through effort. There is no need to take on your thoughts. Notice the imperturbable light of awareness. Notice how that awareness is undisturbed by thought. It is undisturbed by emotion. It is undisturbed by circumstance. Just as the vast open sky is undisturbed by weather. Notice how generous and open and inherently allowing this wide open sky of awareness is. It does not require your efforting. Come back to the simplicity of recognizing meditation as a non-activity. Recognizing meditation as simply being as you are. Simply resting as you know yourself as this imperturbable light of awareness. Thank you. I want to continue along this theme. Continuing on with this recognition of ourselves as awareness. Specifically in light of how thought imagines the separate self. And that when we're imagining ourselves as a separate self, we're seeking happiness in conventional objects. We're chasing after these conventional objects. And we then approach meditation often in the same way. So in the same way that I'm hoping these objects might bring me happiness, although if you're on this call, it's likely that you've seen through that as a process. You recognize that the new car isn't going to bring sustaining happiness. We can often, and I'm currently on a little jag about and very interested in, is how in spiritual practice we often approach our meditation practice with that same mindset. So a sense of meditation as an activity, and there's something to be done, and there's someone to do it. So I need to clear my mind. I need to focus on an object to help me clear my mind. But that would be like awareness, the awareness that I was pointing to in this meditation, this open, broad field of infinite awareness, saying, I need to affect the weather. I need to control the landscape. That form of meditation doesn't allow for the being that is inherently so with awareness itself. The beingness of presence. Most importantly, the kind of happiness that we chase after, whether it's through objects or whether it's through our meditation practice, that happiness might lead to a short-term sense of peace. So perhaps I repeat a breath mantra over and over and over and over and over, which is not invaluable practice, great practice. Recognize, however, that as a practice might lead to a temporary experience of peace. And I think if you're on this call, what you deeply long for is something more imperturbable, more lasting. This brings in this topic of being with. If there's a sense of, I need to control the weather, then that And if you've been practicing a while, it's likely the voice of the conditioned mind is likely not going to come in and say, I need to get my mind to be completely clear. Okay? You've likely practiced long enough to know that that doesn't work. But I'm inviting you to explore the way in which the conditioned mind still will run a similar racket, but now with this conversation of, I simply need to be with this. I need to allow this. What I'm encouraging you to explore from a place of gentle curiosity and inquiry is when that process gets colonized by the sense of separateness itself, by the illusion of separateness itself. You might watch for a cue, could be the red flag of noticing when self-talk begins with, I need to. I need to be with this, or I need to be okay with this. How often are we realizing in our practice, we've practiced enough to be able to watch anger arise, for example. How often are we then bringing in a second tier of a dualistic relationship with what's arising by saying, now I need to manage this anger, or again, a more subtle form of being in relationship with it, I need to be with this anger. We know that acceptance is the right answer, so we keep trying to accept. What I want to point out in this call is that awareness itself is never trying to accept. Awareness is not trying to be with. Awareness is always with. So what shifts in our practice when we allow ourselves to experience that withness in a way that doesn't feed that duality of I need to be with. Here is this sadness. I need to be with it. This all is arising out of the same field of awareness. I just suddenly wished I had like a sci-fi soundtrack for that. It's like coming into the video frame. Arising in this field. Okay, I need some good music. Every thought is arising in the same open field of awareness. Every intention to be with, every form that the illusion of a separate self takes is arising within the same open field of awareness. Awareness isn't holding on to thoughts. And awareness isn't making an effort to let go. Awareness isn't making an effort to be with. In fact, surrendering to awareness is even misleading. Language is tricky in this way. In fact, it's not as though there's an I that surrenders to. awareness itself is already surrendered. We're simply recognizing ourselves as that surrendered, open space, which inherently allows for everything that is. When we recognize ourselves as that awareness, the efforting can begin to cease. Rather than our experience being colonized by this illusion of separateness, our experience becomes colonized by our recognition of ourselves as that which is undisturbable, imperturbable. When we turn meditation into a doing, we're overlooking that inherent nature. That inherent, imperturbable suchness. Before we move into some questions, I want to say one more thing about this, simply to feed any questions that might have arisen, or any inquiry, anything you'd like to discuss. All this said, I think there is great benefit in practice in playing the role of the compassionate mentor within that is with experience. And I want to clarify that. So in particular, as was mentioned in the introduction, half my life is spent working with adults, sharing awareness practice, and half my life is working with teenagers through our Peace in Schools program. With adults beginning this journey, and certainly with teenagers, I have seen is invaluable to be able to playfully create a form, the compassionate mentor within, to be the embodiment, to have form for the formless open awareness that I'm referring to. It's so valuable because we're so accustomed to the inner critic being in relationship with our experience. So constantly walking around with self-talk that asserts that we aren't good enough, or that that whatever we do isn't enough. It's the most common block I see in working with adults. It's invaluable as we're beginning practice to be able to turn to a compassionate mentor within versus that inner critic. But I want to clarify before we open it up for questions that that's simply a form that we playfully give, that we playfully create, and that it's simply a representative of this open, spacious awareness, a more direct representative. What's important about it is in a moment of suffering, when it might feel esoteric to try to remember ourselves as awareness, right? Something really difficult just happened. I just got in an argument with my partner. It's incredibly helpful to be able to recognize that that's what's arising in the moment, and then to meet that with compassion, And I think that's where the being with first stemmed from, before it's colonized by the ego. There's a beautiful practice that can serve us deeply, in which we allow ourselves to take the role. Now this is a creation, we're making this up, but we're taking the role of the compassionate mentor, turning towards the part of us who suffers and asking, what do you need? I love you no matter what. I'm with you. How can I support you? It's useful within this practice, however, to remember that that form is merely a representation of this large, open, spacious, loving field of awareness. And that as we practice, we recognize that there actually is no one to do the being with anything. That there's truly nothing outside conscious, compassionate awareness. Thank you. Before we move into questions, and I'm grateful that there are some, I'm clicking over to see some questions, I do want to put out a very loving reminder that these calls are born of the spirit of generosity. I actually just found myself really moved by saying that, and I think it's because I've been paying attention to politics lately. And I think that the sharing of practice in the face of some of the craziness of what's occurring in our world is, I know for me, a real lifeline. And I trust that if you're on the call, it is for you as well. To have a place where we can come back and remember that which is true and real in this world, and to remember it together as a community is very touching and important, globally important for our youth and for our adults and for our aging. It's very important. So I just want to encourage you to give as generously as you can to Worldwide Insight. It's very important because there are many people who volunteer to make this programming happen. I think there's probably an idea that perhaps this platform is free, and it's not. This isn't YouTube. And a lot of work goes into making these calls happen. So I hope that you'll support Worldwide Insight. And it's especially important, not just because there's so many people volunteering, but because I'd love to see this grow. And it will only grow through support. Even if every person on this call right now just gave $10, that would be a generous way for this program to sustain itself. So thank you for listening to my plug for offering from the spirit of generosity. And as I mentioned at the beginning of this call, I think my very favorite part of this whole process is being able to share with others through inquiry. And I see a question written in, and I'm also wondering if anyone would like to come on screen with me. I very much enjoy it when I'm able to be next to someone so that we can have an actual exchange. In the meantime, so I invite that, and in the meantime, I'm going to read one of these. To recognize ourself as that which you refer to in your talk, where is the place of effort in our spiritual practice? It's a very, very good question. I would love to have this dialogue because I'd love to learn a little bit about where the place of effort is for you. I wonder if you say your name, Abbas. I would absolutely love to hear where that is for you. So if you would like to come on, please do, and we can have an exchange. If you would prefer that I simply speak to my experience of that, I'm also willing. So I spent 8 years in a silent Zen monastery, and in that context, I can say there was a tremendous amount of efforting. I do not look back on that experience with any sense of wasted time or regret over those experiences of effort. Everything that we've experienced has led us to the experience we're having right now. It's an incredibly important part of my history. That said, the most profound shifts in my own experience of practice have come when I've been able to recognize that that which was doing the efforting is no different than that which wanted to find happiness through a conventional object, that which was scrambling for something. It's incredibly alarming for that ego to consider that our practice could become effortless in a new way. There's a deep sense of faith and trust that opens when we consider that meditation, for example, doesn't have to be an activity. Meditation practices that involve activity, that involve using objects, for example, as a way to anchor the attention in the present moment are wonderful. We offer them to teens as a way to be able to recognize when the attention has wandered off somewhere and know how to come back here. It's not my experience that awareness of being here requires the kind of effort that we're conditioned to apply to our practice, however. So if you would care to discuss that more, I would love to. But for now, I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much. Another question has been typed in. Anything arises out of awareness, so does attention, yes? I will answer that first part. Angelica, I hope I'm saying your name right. Again, if you'd like to come on, I invite you to. Angelica. Yes, all of it is arising out of awareness. And yes, our attention arises out of awareness as well. The place I think we get tripped up in awareness practice, we get tripped up in having the attention always and habitually focused outward on objects. Even the object of the breath can become a way in which we're, in a sense, falling into that trap, though there is no problem and it's not really a trap. So the attention is moving outward. And as we come back to this place of awareness, what occurs is the attention is given the opportunity to come back to its source. Awareness is the source of that attention. The attention can come back and rest in its own source. It's a different direction than we habitually turn the attention. We habitually turn the attention out. This is a turning towards source. So thank you for that first part. Okay. when the attention is redirected to awareness instead of to any arisen phenomenon? Is it then that awareness is recognizing itself? That awareness recognizing itself? I think you simply mean awareness is recognizing itself. Yes. Yes, in that moment, the I that you're referring to is the I of awareness. You're recognizing yourself. Awareness is recognizing itself as awareness. It's the meditation becomes knowing yourself as awareness. To go back to our other question, there's very little efforting in that. I would assert in that specific example, there's no efforting. Does it take any effort right now for you to be aware of my voice? Does it take great effort? You're simply aware of my voice. And now you can simply know, you can be aware of being aware. I'm aware of sound. I'm aware of this voice. I'm aware of this moment. Awareness is aware. Thank you. Okay, we're back to, and perhaps I see a question from Natalie. I see a hand raised for Natalie, and I'm wondering if one of our tech support could bring Natalie onto the screen. That would be great. I see that hand raised. Or perhaps someone could give me a note if there's a way that I should be doing that, but in the past someone else is. And Sally as well now is hoping to come on screen, and I would enjoy that very much. So I have a note here that says, and this is back from, again, I'm sorry if I'm not saying your name right, Abbas. What is the difficult bit, the barriers to recognizing yourself as that you talked about? What is the difficult bit, the barriers to recognizing yourself as that you talked about? Okay, and then you follow up by saying no is my effort for me, but I'm not sure it is a wasted unfortunately, unfortunately it's a bit, the question is a bit jumbled. Maybe there's a text in there that I'm missing. My effort for me. Perhaps you'd be willing to come on screen and it'll make more sense. What the barriers that you, what is the difficult bit? The barriers to recognizing yourself as that you talked about. Well, all I can do is comment on what I think you might be pointing to. So the barriers to recognizing ourselves as awareness are all those moments where we believe ourselves to be our thoughts. We believe ourselves to be that voice of the inner critic. We believe ourselves as we have a perception that we are that illusion of a separate self that is in relationship with whatever is arising. It's an illusory barrier. In reality, there is no such barrier in the open, spacious field of awareness, but that barrier feels very real to us because we're identified with that voice of conditioning that asserts that we are something other, we are separate. Again, I hope that clarifies. I'm not 100% sure I understood your follow-up question accurately, but thank you for writing back in. Okay. Again, I'd love to find out now. We have more folks that would like to come onto the call. And I wonder if I can get some assistance from tech support. Okay. Okay. I'm seeing some support here. Natalie hasn't gotten her camera enabled. I understand, Natalie. I'm sorry that that is the case. Okay, it looks like Sally has. Meanwhile, I see a question here. So hopefully Sally will come on soon. Meanwhile, I see a question from Deborah. Can you speak to the healing quality of awareness? Absolutely. So in my experience, we, whatever the best word that is the opposite of healing, our destruction, our disease, our dis-ease, comes when we feel separate from life. So in the moment that I'm identified with the conditioned mind, in the moment that I'm identified with the story of separateness, great suffering occurs, great resistance. As we see through this veil, the veil of separation, as we see through this illusion of separation, that schism of that split that isn't actually inherently true, but feels very real to us. We can't deny the reality of that experience for the one experiencing it. That very split is healed. To me, that's the most profound healing that can happen for us. All other healing that arises from, for a healer, even if it's just a momentary recognition or collapse of that split. So it could be that I'm simply having an exchange with a teenager in distress through our Peace in Schools program. In that very moment, if I'm able to meet the teen from recognizing who that teen authentically is, we could say love is arising, love is occurring. In that love, what's really happening is the recognition of this merged reality, this non-separate reality. And then someone on the outside might say, well, that was a very healing exchange. But the healing didn't come from, I, Caverly, your mindful studies teacher, am going to now try to heal you or bring healing to this circumstance. The healing came from the recognition of oneness. Thank you for that great question. Now I will look to see if anyone else can be brought on. Okay. Oh, great. Here we have Sally. Hi, Sally. Thank you for coming on. Oh, no, I can't hear Sally. I hope that there is some way to get some sound for Sally. Okay. Well, there. Are we hearing Sally now? All right. Are you there, Sally? Okay. Let's see if I can hear Sally. Come again, Sally. Can you try again? Oh, unfortunately, to the loving tech crew who supports us, I must report that I can't hear Sally. Okay, so yes, thank you for typing, Sally. Let me scroll through and see if I can find a couple more questions have come in, and I can see if I can find Sally's. Okay, great. So I don't see a question from Sally. And again, I apologize that there is some trickiness to the exchange regarding the sound and the video. I totally know that everybody involved is doing the best they can, including me. For all I know, it's something on my end, but I don't think so at this point. We've got 3 more people with their hands raised, and I hope that we can pull one of them on soon. In the meantime, I see Sharon's question. I always seem to find another level of representation of an I that is being aware of being aware and is making an effort to surrender. How do we cease making an effort? Thank you, Sharon, so much for this question. We don't have to. Simply notice that the one who is making the effort is a form arising out of the same open field of awareness. Your question is really valuable. You're right. We can continually see something and then back up and see something and back up and see something and back up. But just recognize awareness has room for that process to continue on infinitely. The beauty of where you are in your practice is that you're recognizing that that process will never work itself out on its own. That actually what you're being invited to do in your own practice right now is allow that process to simply be what it is. Do what it does. I love that Charlotte Joko Beck, apparently, I believe it was her, used to say, we don't get rid of karma, we just wear it out. So simply allow the part of you who efforts to do her thing. She will do her thing. She's not a problem. In the same way that your neighbor's thoughts are not a problem. In the same way you don't need to get rid of or manage or adjust or even be with your neighbor's thoughts. Your neighbor's thoughts are already being embraced, if you will. And what's beautiful is they're not only, we haven't even gotten into this in this call, but they're not only being embraced by awareness, they're being animated by that same awareness. They're being known by that same awareness. We have touched on that aspect of it. So simply let yourself rest in a place of being aware of being aware. And from awareness, notice that the inner critic will have something to say about that process. The one who always is stepping back and trying to get one step ahead and then comment is going to continue to do that process. You don't have to mess with them. Thank you very much, Sharon. Okay, no one else is coming on yet. That's okay. Hope it works. Meanwhile, I'm going to keep scrolling through questions here. Thank you guys again for your patience. Okay, this is from George. I've heard some teachers say that the effects of meditation take some time to have an impact on one's being. This long time appears to be associated with effort. Dedicating time and space for practice is also effort. I agree that sometimes when I practice, effortlessness happens. Other times, I work on loving kindness. Yes, George, yes. That is why I do like the word. I often talk about awareness practice. It's a deep and I think beautiful and rich irony that it takes a certain kind of effort for me to be able to get myself on a retreat where I can practice knowing myself as awareness and recognizing that no internal effort is required. What you're looking at is important. You're looking at the distinction of, in a sense, in each moment, can you approach with fresh eyes, can you approach this question of what is doing the efforting? Can you simply notice? You will feel a very strong difference between the energetic approach of efforting that implies that there's something to fix, change, do, know, master, get, and the efforting that is like falling in love with someone and knowing that you want to make the effort to spend time with them. Our meditation practice can be infused with that same love. That same love is simply the disillusion of the experience of separateness. It's the dissolving of it. Our desire for love is like the separate self desiring for that rift to be, to use someone else's words, to be healed. So our effort, our right effort, is right. Speaking of these traditional ways of perceiving right effort, what makes it right, if you will, not right as the opposite of wrong, but what makes it right, what makes it compassionate, is that it's born of our recognition of what's true and real in the first place. It's like answering a call of love and responding with love. That's a different kind of effort, and I thank you for clarifying that. Thank you. Okay. So we have other, I'm going to leave a little space in case somebody else can come on, and thank you, George. And now the next question I see is from Caroline. Sometimes when an old and very painful story gets triggered, I'm unable to stay with the pain or recognize myself as awareness. Absolutely, those are very common places for us to lose sight of that. And that is the very moment that I think it's so incredibly important to have this tool of knowing how to access the compassionate mentor within. So I hope that last part of what I talked about resonated for you. Do you have any advice? How to work with the early experiences of trauma and being strongly identified with it? Simply saying, be the awareness doesn't work. Oh, and this is actually from Adriana. Caroline posted it, but it's from Adriana. So thank you, Adriana. Simply saying, be the awareness doesn't work. Yes, I couldn't agree more. So this is what I was hoping we might get to in this call, wanting to make this distinction, because it's simply it becomes a process of, for some reason right now I'm blanking on that word when we're, like a type of bypassing. That wasn't the word I was looking for, but that says it. We fall into a trap of a type of bypassing if we just say, well, just know yourself as awareness. That's no different than if you came in your home and a young child who you love very, very much was in your living room and struggling. It would be no different than you saying, well, I really think you just need to recognize yourself as awareness, and your experience is actually, there's something illusory about it. You would never do that. You would hold the child. You would say to the child, I love you in the face of this experience, and I love you when this experience isn't arising. What's unchanging is the love. I am going to be with you no matter what. I'm unafraid of your reactions to all the terrible and traumatic things that have happened in your life. My love is unconditional, and I'm not going anywhere. that moment, that process is a process in which all we were doing in that moment is giving words to the way in which awareness is always embracing our experience. But we're giving language to it. We are being loved in that way. We are love. But it's very difficult to remember that as trauma is triggered. Very, very difficult. So we must release our expectation that we will remember it. And as we release our expectation, practice, and this can take that kind of effort born of love that I was speaking about. Practice in the very moment we're triggered, turning to the compassionate mentor within, rather than turning to the voice within that's hyping up the trauma, maintaining it, feeding it. So that was a very important question. Thank you, Adriana. I hope that was clarifying. Okay, Sally. Enjoyed your radically simple yet refreshing teaching, noticing an ease or absence of my recent sense of suffering when resting in the awareness you were speaking about. Then I noticed doubt arising, perhaps because I'm not used to the lack of effort. Thank you, Sally. In my own history with training, that is the doubt that I've watched as the most pervasive doubt. It's the one that I watch arise the most consistently as I work with others. But it couldn't possibly be this simple. It couldn't possibly be the case that which suffers is actually a creation. That in practice, what we have the opportunity to do is see that creation for what it is. It's a very different approach than trying to fix the one who's suffering. The one who's suffering can never be fixed. It can simply be recognized for what it is. And it is awareness that recognizes that creation for what it is. I'm sorry you're not able to be on screen with me because I'd love to hear whether that lands for you, and if so, how. But what you're doing is incredibly important. You're questioning that sense of doubt. Does awareness doubt? Is it awareness that's doubting? Thank you so much. Appreciate it, Sally. I hope next time to be able to talk to you in person. So this is from Abbas again. And again, I'm so sorry if I'm butchering your name. Thank you for speaking so eloquently, and you answered my questions. Great. Sincere gratitude. Just by looking at you, one can see your deep insight. Oh, thank you. I hope you will own the projection. I think it's very important that we're able to remember that this insight is not reserved for anyone. There's no reserved seating. This insight that we're referring to in this call is inherent. We have this throughout our teachings, throughout time, but it takes time, I think, for many of us, for it really to land in us. That what we're talking about is inherent and available to us all. It's you end with, it is incredible. There is hope for me. And I just, I feel very moved by you saying that, because I can't tell you how much I feel able to rest in the knowing that that is indeed true, that there is true hope for all of us, that when we've lost hope, all that's happened is we've gotten identified with the conditioned mind that is veiling what is true. All that's happened is we've gotten identified with something that's not even real. We've gotten identified with an illusion. The hope we feel, that glimmer of hope we feel, is simply the glimmer of our own recognition of what is true. It's the glimmer of our own knowing that that illusion can't be who we really are. The deep recognition that it's not. When we're in it, it feels real. It's very important to acknowledge that. And we can't dismiss the reality of the illusion. I think it was Huang Po that originally talked about that, or to my awareness anyway. We can't deny that. It feels real when we're in it, but that's very different from it being real. And what we're doing in this practice, this practiceless practice, that is a practice, right? You had to make some loving effort to show up on this call. We're giving ourselves the opportunity to rest and realize that authenticity, really seep in it versus chase after it by the very thing that can never directly experience it. So thank you. Adriana said thank you, and I thank you. Okay, thank you. So I read another question from Sharon. This may seem to be somewhat the same as my previous question, so I apologize if I'm not getting it. We never need to apologize for the very rich places in which we recognize we're deliciously unpacking something that doesn't feel either that it perfectly resonates for us yet, or doesn't feel so to us yet. So this is perfect. It's why we're here. So in DBT, the compassionate mentor is called Wise Mind. I have long been able to turn to Wise Mind when I'm suffering. Wonderful. Is there a next step to releasing this representation? I'm really glad you wrote back in, Sharon. I'm not suggesting releasing that representation at all, and I hope that I can have this last minute to clarify that. I simply am naming that representation is, it's a representation, it's a form that's created. It's not a problem. More and more as you practice, you will notice that representation is the thing that you feel infusing your whole experience of being. I remember when I was training monastically and I was working with reassurances, offering compassionate, loving reassurances to myself. And I remember the morning that I woke up and the first thing I heard was, I love you. It was a profound shift for me that was just not something that I was applying any effort to. It just simply was there. And that the work you've done is to be acknowledged and applauded. And you don't need to release that mentor. You simply will recognize as you continue to practice that mentor was a form that assisted you as your whole experience became more and more colonized by the recognition that you were always that loving, compassionate experience. You always have been awareness. When you were 5 years old, what was authentically true is you were that open, expansive awareness, compassionate awareness, and it's still true now. Let the compassionate mentor be an active practice in your life. Don't feel that there's any problem. There is no problem at all. Friends, I see that we are 1 minute online, and Sharon, thank you for saying that that was helpful. I'm glad. I'm very glad to be here today, and I'll just end with an invitation. We are exploring this topic more deeply in person in California, and if it interests you to learn about that retreat, I encourage you to visit onehouseofpeace.org. And that website will show you about our summer retreat in California that's on the topic of resting the mind and the heart of awareness. So I would love to see folks there in person. And I'm sorry that we were having some technical difficulties, but I thank you for sticking with it. And I thank you for all that you give and all the ways that you show up for your practice, and therefore all the ways that you show up, even unconsciously, to support the practice of others as well. The recognition of who we authentically are, the ways we support that in each other and ourselves. Thank you. Many blessings. you.